Okay, so we're going to be talking about the tissues. So if you'll go into your lab class in Canvas, go into the modules on the left-hand side. When you click into modules, this is what you'll see. Go to this practical 1 and click on the first link underneath it, the Intro Lab Practical 1 Study Guide. When you click on that, the study guide will come up. When the study guide comes up, go to page 23. So 23 will look like this. It'll say tissues across the middle of the slide. Okay, so remember your levels of organization. You started out at the chemical level, and the chemical level had the atoms, and a bunch of atoms get together to form molecules. Then a bunch of molecules get together to form cells, and that's the cellular level. And then a bunch of different cells get together to form tissues, and that's the tissue level. So that's what we're studying now, is the tissue level of organization. There are 4 big tissue groups. The first big tissue group here is nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is responsible for internal communication. It's going to be found in the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. Then you have muscle tissue. Muscle tissue is responsible for doing contractions that will cause movement. You have muscles that are attached to bones. Those muscles are called skeletal muscles. You have muscles of the heart. Those muscles are called cardiac muscles. And then you have muscles in the hollow organs. Those are called smooth muscle. The third group of tissues is your epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissue is going to be responsible for forming boundaries between the outside environment and the inside environment of the body. It is going to protect, secrete, absorb, and filter. Epithelial tissue is going to line the GI tract and the GI tract organs. It is also going to cover the body in the form of skin. The fourth big category of tissues is connective tissue. Connective tissues support, protect, and bind other tissues together. And examples of connective tissue would be bones, tendons, and fat. So before we go to this second slide right here, I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to go down to this right here. Okay, no, I'm not. Bear with me just 1 minute. Okay, so the first group of tissues we're going to talk about are the epithelial tissues. So epithelial tissues is a big category of tissues with a lot of tissues found within this category. When you're naming epithelial tissues, your epithelial tissues get a first, middle, and last name. Looking at this slide right here, the first name is going to be telling you how many layers. So if the tissue only has 1 layer, then the first name is going to be simple. If the tissue has more than 1 layer, the first name is going to be stratified. So the first name for your epithelial tissues is either simple or stratified. Then the middle name is going to tell you the shape of the cells in that tissue. If they're squashed, flattened cells, the middle name is going to be squamous. If they are square, cube-shaped cells, they're going to be called cuboidal. And if they're tall rectangles, it's going to be columnar. So the middle name is either going to be squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. And the last name is the big tissue family it belongs to. So all of these will belong to epithelial tissues. So the last name is epithelium. So again, the first name tells you how many layers. So it will be either simple or stratified. The middle name tells you what the shape of the cells are. It'll either be squamous for squash cells, cuboidal for cube-shaped cells, or columnar for tall column-shaped cells. Then the last name is going to be the family of tissues. So in this case, epithelium. So now that we know how to name our epithelial tissues, let's go back to our study guide to page 25. The first tissue we have here is simple squamous. So you're looking at this tissue from the side. So you see there's one row or one ring of cells. So right here, this is one squashed cell. This is another squashed cell. This is another squashed cell. Everywhere where you see a nucleus is another squashed cell. So if we have one layer thick of squashed cells, that means that this is simple because it's one layer, squamous because they're squashed cell shape, and the last name is epithelium. So simple squamous epithelium. This is what it looks like when you're looking at it from the top view. It looks like fried eggs. And this is the way it will look underneath our slides or underneath our microscopes, but it will be lighter than this. So it won't be quite as dark. So this is simple squamous epithelium because it's one layer of these odd shaped cells. So it's simple squamous epithelium. You're going to skip this slide. I will not ask you simple squamous from this slide. It's confusing. The next tissue is called stratified squamous epithelium. If you see here, there are just rows and rows and rows. So row after row after row. There's probably, what, 10 or 20 rows here of flattened cells. So if there are more than one row, our first name is stratified. If it's squashed cells, and you can see, you're looking at the top cells to see what shape it is. These top cells are very squashed. So the middle name is squamous and last name is epithelium. So this is stratified squamous epithelium. This is what it looks like under a slide. Again, this is darker than what our slides look like, but you can see just rows and rows and rows of squashed cells here. So this is stratified squamous epithelium. And this epithelium is going to be found on the skin. So up here where you can see some of these cells are sloughing off or tearing off, as you go throughout the day and your skin rubs against things, you'll have skin cells that rub off continuously throughout the day. And that's what you're actually seeing here, are these skin cells sloughing off the top of this tissue. The next tissue we have is simple cuboidal. So it's simple because within that circle right there, there's only one row of nuclei. Each circle is a different layer of this tissue. So within that circle, there's only one row of nuclei. That makes this one layer thick. So that's simple. And if you draw a line on the outside of each cell, they look like this. So they're cube-shaped cells that make up these circles. Those cube-shaped shells give the middle name of cuboidal. So one layer thick is simple. The middle name, the cells are cube-shaped, so it's cuboidal. So this is simple cuboidal epithelium. This is what it looks like under a slide. So again, you have this cube-shaped cell. I keep tripping over that word. Cube-shaped cell. And you have one row of nuclei in this circle. So that makes this your simple cuboidal epithelium. And one little tip here, if you see circles like this, you should automatically know that this is simple cuboidal epithelium. The next tissue we have is simple columnar epithelium. Simple because it's one row thick. So it's going to go to right here. So ignore all this. Oops, sorry, my little drawing got a little carried away there. Okay, I'm going to get my pen again. So you're going to ignore everything down here. Okay, that's just underlying tissue. What you're looking at is these are one row of tall column-shaped cells right here, okay? So if you have one row of tall column cells, the one row gives it the name simple. Tall rectangle cells gives the middle name columnar, and the family name is epithelium. So this is simple columnar epithelium. This is what it looks like underneath the slide or underneath the scope. You're going to see that the nuclei stand tall and they're in nice, neat, orderly rows like soldiers marching in a line. Okay, looks very neat, and the nuclei are all in one row. So that clues you in that this is simple columnar epithelium. The next one is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. So pseudo means fake or false. So if you wear fake eyelashes, you actually wear pseudo eyelashes. Okay, so pseudo means fake, and it's fake stratified or fake layers. Okay, because if you've ever been at a concert and everybody's standing up at the front of the stage, some people can stand straight up. Some people start to stand straight up and they have to peer behind somebody. Another guy, you get part of his upper body and then all of his lower body. And then another one's trying to see around, but it can't. Then another one comes by. And so it looks, I'm going to draw the little dots as nuclei. It's real messy, and it looks like we have multiple layers of nuclei. We actually don't. These cells are so squashed that it gives the appearance of multiple layers, but it's actually only one layer. So the false impression of multiple layers gives the first name, pseudostratified. They are tall columnar cells. So you can see in this little cartoon illustration here, they're tall column-shaped cells. So the middle name is columnar, and the last name is a family name, epithelium. So pseudostratified columnar epithelium. This is what it looks like under a slide. This is darker than our slides, but you're seeing it looks extremely messy. There's nuclei squeezed in and out of everything. And then you see these eyelash hairs up here. Those eyelash hairs are called cilia. If you see a tissue that looks extremely messy with eyelash hairs, that clues you in that this is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Then in the epithelial tissues, we have one rule breaker. This rule breaker only has two names, so he doesn't have a first, middle, last. He only has a first and last name. This is your transitional epithelium, and transitional epithelium has these rounded tops or these scalloped edges. Okay, so these scalloped edges or rounded tops clue you in that this is transitional epithelium. This is found in the urinary bladder, because as your urinary bladder fills up with urine, it's going to squash these cells all down flat. And then when you empty your bladder, these cells are going to puff up and they're going to be these rounded, puffy cells. So if you see those scalloped edges, those rounded tops, that clues you in that this is going to be transitional epithelium, because these cells are always in transition from flat to fluffy, depending on how much urine you have in the bladder. This is what it looks like. This is a terrible picture, by the way, but this is what it looks like under the scope. Ours will look a little bit more clear than that. But you see, like right here, you can see it humped. And then it humps again, and then it humps again, and then it humps again. So you have those scalloped edge tops, those fluffy tops. So this is your transitional epithelium. And again, this is found in the bladder. Okay, so let's go back and review all those epithelial tissues before we move on to our connective tissues. So now that we've looked at all of the epithelial tissues you have to know, there are two pieces of information I can ask you for each. I can ask you what is a big tissue category. And for all these right here, the big tissue category is epithelium or epithelial, and then the specific tissue name. So for each one of these, after I talk about them, I will ask you those two questions and I'll give you the answers to both of those. So again, if you see fried eggs clues you in that this is simple squamous epithelium. So again, fried eggs is simple squamous epithelium. The big tissue category is epithelial, and the specific tissue name is simple squamous epithelium. This one, many rows of flattened cells. So many rows is stratified, flattened cells is squamous. So this tissue is called stratified squamous epithelium. The big tissue category is epithelial, and the specific tissue name is stratified squamous epithelium. Remember, if you see circles, it's going to clue you in that this is simple cuboidal epithelium. The big tissue category is epithelial, and the specific tissue name is simple cuboidal epithelium. This one, the nuclei look like they're soldiers marching in an extremely nice and neat line. So that means that this is simple columnar because of one row of nuclei there, and they're all in a super straight, nice and neat line. So that's simple columnar epithelium. The big tissue category here is epithelium. The specific tissue name is simple columnar epithelium. Then this one, super messy with the eyelashes. So super messy with the eyelashes. This has a false multiple layer look or false stratification. So this is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Looks very messy, nuclei all over the place with the eyelashes called cilia. So big tissue category here is epithelium, and the specific tissue name is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. And the last epithelial tissue we have is transitional epithelium. Transitional, remember, has those scalloped edges, so you see it looks kind of rounded bumps on top. If you have those rounded bumps or those fluffy edges, that clues you in that this is transitional epithelium. Remember, it's the only one with only two names, transitional epithelium. So the big tissue category is epithelial, and the specific tissue name is transitional epithelium.